before we get into today's topic, I just wanted to say thank you for helping me get to 100,000 subscribers. This is a labor of love for me. It's not a job per se. It's just something I do for fun because I love technology and I love teaching. So why not do it? So thank you once again. I truly appreciate it. Have a blessed day. Okay, so we're about halfway through this lesson and have a few things set up now. So let's do a recap on what has been created and why. Again, the purpose of this tutorial is to illustrate a simple, clear example of making app services integrate with private resources or to be completely private altogether. So let's quickly take a look at the demo client that we created, what's going to run inside of the app service. It's a basic Blazor application. We're using the interactive render mode, which is not going to matter here. But we basically have a response message right here that's inside of a header. And in here, we have a call to basically call demo server. When the button is clicked, it's going to call this method. And inside of here, we're going to place our code that actually makes a call out to the internal URL for the service that we're going to be connecting to. So we're first going to try it using private, then try it using public. And as a matter of fact, why don't we just get going and see what we do? So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to basically create an HTTP client. And basically, when you do this, it injects it into the application. And then to test it out and make sure it's working, why don't we just go ahead and hit Google, and that should just return back some basic HTML. So I'm going to take this and we're going to set it to the response message so it displays in that area. And of course, this is asynchronous, so we're going to have to add an await there, and then async, and change this to task. Next, let's go over to the program.cs, and then let's actually add that HTTP as a dependency, that HTTP client as a dependency. So that services that add HTTP client. We're going to take just the boilerplate version. Don't need to do much. And now we can run this. And if I click call server, there you have it. It returned all the HTML or whatever is returned from calling Google. So we now know this works, so we can change this URL if we so desire to the actual public IP address of the service we're going to be calling. Because again, we're calling the same endpoint that we previously called. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. But we called it with a normal browser before, and now we're going to try to call it directly. There you have it. So working properly, and we can test it out by adding some more stuff to the URL. And as you can see, it's gone and hit our backend server on the VM, and it's actually responded properly. So now let's add a little bit of variability to it. So we're going to allow you to send the address in. And in here, we're going to specify, to specify the address there. And let's change it so that basically whatever we pass in after the address constitutes the path. So up here now, we add the address and we also add the path so that when you're actually calling this guy, um, you'll have to pass in those parameters and it'll use those parameters that you pass in to basically determine what gets displayed. And you'll notice that I've also added the initial one here, not just this, because this initial one up top is going to be used for the first time you hit the server. So if there's no slash, then basically we should be able to hit the landing page, and then we should be able to change the URL as needed, which will take it to that. And then that's going to set the value of path here and the value of address here, so that when we pass it in here, it basically passes those values that we pass in. And if you recall, and you can go look in the last video, the way the HTTP server works is that it is going to basically take this path, and that path is going to be used to generate a response and sent back to you. This part right here, the address, is used for basically determining who to call, right? So basically what HTTP server to call. As stated, right now it's public, but we're going to be switching that to private once we get the public fully working. So we run this now. We'll make a little change at the demo too. And there you have it. So working properly, calling it. And if I change it to testing 1, 2, 3, I'm actually going to have to refresh first. Hit enter. Okay, there we go. And there you go. And it's fully working. So now that you have this set up, let's go ahead and let's create the app service that this code is going to run in. And while we're going through, you might be wondering why we've made a variable of the address piece of it. The reason why we're using the address piece as a variable is because this is not going to be hosted locally to us. And we're not just dealing with the public IP address. At some point, we're going to be switching it to the private IP address. So because of that, we want to make sure that we're able to change where the HTTP client actually calls. So that's the reason why we're basically adding that. So we don't need any of these. It's a basic boilerplate app service. Go ahead and create it. So now that we have that created, let's go ahead and let's deploy our code to the app service. So I'm just doing that to sort of refresh. You can also click the refresh button right here. There we have it. It's inside of demonstration 2. It's like my demo 2. We want to deploy it as a zip package, and then we click finish. And then we click publish. All right, so this is now created, and we can see that this is actually showing the same code we were showing when running locally. So we should be able to take this entire thing here and just pass it verbatim into the other one. There we go. Works perfect. So the next thing we want to do is we now want to call that same app service that we have working now using the public IP address. We want to call it using a private IP address. Now, we don't need to do this, but to make it clear that we're not using the public IP address, I'm actually going to disable that on that VM so that it can't be used. Here we go to our network settings. Here's our network interface. and we're looking for our IP configurations. And as you can see here, the virtual machine has ipconfig 1 is what it's called. And there actually is a private IP address, which is 10.0.0.4. And then here's the public IP address that we've been using to access it. We can, of course, reach this public IP address from anywhere, but the private IP address, we have to be inside of the network to be able to access. So let's go in here and let's actually remove or disassociate the public IP address. And as you can see, that's done. So now we can actually copy that IP and paste it in here. And of course, you're going to see that this isn't going to work. But just so we're clear, when I put that in there, well, that's not working. So now to get this working, what we're going to do is we're going to enable this VNet integration capability. Now to do that, you're going to have to go down to the networking area. And then we want to look down here where it says VNet integration. That's what we're looking for. So as you can see, it says not configured. So click it to configure it. Now we're going to add one VNet integration, and you're going to run into the first issue that you have. And we're going to talk about it for one quick second here. So as you can see, when I click on that, there is no IP address or subnet that I can access. Now, is there a subnet in that range? Is there a subnet there available? Yes, there is. Default is already available. But when you use VNet integration, you need your own subnet. This is because the way VNet integration works conceptually is that, if you recall, in our demo that we created, we've got a VNet here. And inside of that VNet, we basically have a subnet. And inside of that subnet, we have a subnet. There's a VNet, there's a subnet. And inside of that subnet, we have a VM. Okay. Because we have a VM inside of here, and here's the public cloud out here, and here's our app service sitting in there. Because we have a VM in here and an IP address has actually been taken up, we're not going to be able to use it for VNet integration. So for us to enable VNet integration, we actually need a blank subnet. So here's another subnet. That's the subnet that's going to be used. And in this subnet, there will be some kind of proxy, theoretically, a black box that's created. We don't know exactly what it does. But basically, you're going to over here configure your app service so that it's using this VNet as, for VNet integration. And by doing that, it's going to make it so that traffic coming from this app service, it looks like it's coming from this VNet. So it'll look something like that. Right. So whenever I make a request, the request actually will sort of bounce through here and ultimately come through here. And because these subnets can communicate because they're inside of the same VNet, there should be no issue with being able to communicate directly with the server that we've created. So let's try that out and see how it works. So the first thing we're going to need to do here is obviously we need to go and create a VNet. A subnet inside the VNet that we have. So we're going to go back to demo 2, go to the subnets, and let's add a new subnet that's going to be used for our integration. We'll call it VNet integration. Okay, now that we have that, we can go back here and do the same thing. Go back to our networking. And now when we add a VNet integration, we select the virtual network, we should see that the VNet integration subnet is available. So let's create that. This is going to create the integration between the app service and this subnet so that it looks like all traffic is coming from that subnet as opposed to coming directly from the public cloud. So let's try this again. And as you can see, this is now working. So that's all, folks. In this video, we demonstrated being able to deploy code into an app service, and via an app service, communicate to any services running inside of a VM via a public IP address. So we had a service in here. We also demonstrated creating a new subnet and setting up VNet integration with that subnet, and then basically allowing us to be able to communicate directly through the app service and from the app service directly to our VM without using this public IP address. Stay tuned for our next video where we'll go into taking the entire app service and making the whole thing private. So taking this whole thing and putting it in here. Till then, happy coding. Have a blessed day.